Bad Day at the Midway by Boo Boo Finger. It was a dumb dare and he knew it. No one really knew for sure, but everyone kinda suspected that Jimmy was afraid of clowns. Chlorophobia. That was the official name. But Jimmy wasn't gonna tell them that, or he'd be considered an even bigger geek. Plus, Tom was an infamous prankster. That is why he refused when Tom, Carlos, and Harry invited him to go to the old abandoned Midway. Among the locals, it had a bit of a reputation for being haunted. Jimmy held his ground bravely until Harry told him that they were taking their girlfriends along, and that they also invited Tara. Tara was this red-headed cheerleader that Jimmy had had a crush on since like 6th grade. He thought that she was so far out of his league that they were in entirely different universes. But lately, she started smiling in his direction when they shuffled along in the hallway between classes. Out of her league or not, Jimmy was not going to let a chance like this pass by him. The Midway, as it was called by the locals, was not a fun place. The locals spoke about how the Bertolini Circus had its home base there, and it had fallen on hard times. It was hard competing with the likes of television when video games had finally become common. That was the last nail in the coffin, and the circus went bankrupt. The story goes that they were going to make one last grand performance on the outskirts of town. However, one of the performers, a veteran clown named Ebel, had not taken the news too well. In fact, the thought of being jobless that late in life, and the field that was not exactly booming, drove him quite literally insane. No one really noticed his insanity until he set fire to the Big Top during the uncharacteristically packed farewell show. Many had died that night, either by fire, smoke, or trampled by the crowd, panicked and rushing out. But Ebel wasn't satisfied. He decided to add to the chaos by releasing all the wild animals, the lions, the tigers, and elephants, all while attendants were busy trying to put the fire out. The animals trampled and mauled a pretty considerable number of people. Well, the ones lucky enough to make it out of the burning tent. But the most disturbing part of the legend was that Ebel was seen in the crowd, bashing people's heads with one of those huge wooden mallets, the ones that were used to put up the Big Top, all while laughing uncontrollably. Ebel had gone horribly mad, and he would be rotting in the loony bin till this day if the local sheriff and his deputies didn't put at least 30 bullets into his body. The number of dead had exceeded 200 men, women, and children that night. It was not something that the locals liked to talk about. And since then, the place has been abandoned and avoided by the locals. But they do tell stories. They say that the ghost of Ebel still haunts the place, preying on transients and slow-witted teenagers who dare to try to spend the night in that cursed place. That was the place that Jimmy was being invited to party. Hormones had won over the battle in intellect when they dangled Tara in front of him. And so, at twilight, Jimmy met his schoolmates at the edge of town, and they walked across the field to the Midway. The Big Top tent had burned down to ashes a long time ago, but the rides, the funhouse, the trailers, all of those were still there, rotting away in advanced states of disrepair. Jimmy had grown up with Carlos and Harry. They liked to pick on him every so often, but they were the closest things to friends that he had, especially Harry. Tom was a new addition to the group, having moved to town only a couple years ago from up north. Then, of course, there was Harry, Carlos, Tom's girlfriend Dana, Jill, and Heather. But the addition that most excited him was the possibility that Tara would join their little group, and maybe even be his girlfriend. She had been pleasant but quiet most of the way there. But Jimmy, crippled by self-consciousness, failed miserably to start anything close to a conversation with her, until they arrived. She made a comment about how creepy the place was, and how strange the way that she found it very exciting. Jimmy agreed, trying his best to impress her. The evening, though full of angst, seemed to be going really well for Jimmy. After foraging for some wood, they lit up a fire between two derelict gaming booths. They all sat around the fire while Tom went to his cooler to get cold beer for each and every one. After drinking a few beers, they sat, laughed, and talked, until they started pairing off and moving away for a little more privacy, until only Jimmy and Tara were left alone by the fire. Deep down, Jimmy suspected that at least Tom was up to something. He expected Tom to jump out from behind a booth with a flashlight under his chin or a mask on or something to try to scare him. But all of these thoughts melted away as Tara moving closer and closer into him. They finally kissed. Sparks flew for Jimmy. The whole world could have ended right then and there, and he would have never noticed. As luck would have it, Jimmy's suspicions were not unfounded. The guys had indeed planned to scare him. The whole thing was Tom's brainchild. He got everyone to play along. He even managed to convince Tara to play along, just to keep Jimmy distracted. Harry, who was the tallest, put on a clown suit and mask, and he would come running towards Jimmy, screaming and waving a plastic mallet. Tom, the architect, would be hiding in the bushes, ready to film all of it so he could post it on YouTube later. It would be epic, guaranteed to get at least 1 million hits. So Tom had said. Harry, Carlos, and the girls met up behind a booth, giggling with mischief, trying real hard not to be heard. Harry and Dana went a little further so Harry could get dressed up. Harry picked a spot behind a booth and put on his red and yellow clown suit, then sat down and put on the oversized shoes. He stood up and felt a strange sensation, almost as if he was being watched. But after looking around, he brushed it off as excitement for the prank ahead. As he slipped the rubber mask over his eyes, he felt a chill travel up his spine. It was the last thing that Harry ever felt. Dana saw it first. Dana saw the clown in the bi-colored suit turning around the corner from behind the booth. She thought about how scary the mask looked. It was a typical bozo face, but twisted into some demonic expression and a gaping mouth filled with pointed teeth. Harry was doing a great job at doing the scary walk too, she thought. She came closer to wish Harry good luck on the prank. It was then that she realized whoever was behind the mask wasn't Harry. She felt wrong when she touched him. The clown reached out and grabbed her wrist and pulled her closer. She tried to scream, but the clown had forced a plastic chicken down her windpipe, choking her. She tried to run to warn the others, but deprived of oxygen, her body gave out a few feet away. She fell to the ground. She could hear the maniacal, high-pitched laughter as her vision faded. Jill was the first of the group to see him. As Carlos and Heather were busy making out, she let out a terrified scream, put her hands up, and did a little pantomime expression of being terrified. The couple looked up, tried not to laugh, and started acting scared too. They thought that the prank was still on. They realized it was for real when the mallet came down and cracked Jill's skull wide open. Carlos tried to confront the clown to protect Heather, but that didn't go well. The mallet came down hard, square in the middle of his chest. His ribs made a popping sound as he cracked and fell to the ground, blood trickling from the corners of his mouths. Paralyzed with horror, Heather watched. She watched as the clown jumped on top of Carlos. He danced and crushed her boyfriend's body, using his oversized shoes. She snapped out of the trance and ran towards Jimmy and Tara. There was nothing fake about the look of horror in her eyes as she ran away screaming. Tara thought it was some kind of big joke and rolled on the ground laughing as Jimmy got up and ran towards the back, screaming at the top of his lungs. She realized that it wasn't a joke when she looked up and saw the clown had pounded Heather's head flat against the asphalt with a very real mallet. Her brain was still processing what exactly was going on as the mallet came down directly on her head. Tom tried to run, but he tripped over a rotting wooden beam on the ground. That gave the clown, now laughing ever harder, more than enough time to reach him. Tom was grabbed by his ankles, lifted from the floor by vice-like hands, and tossed after being spun around a couple of times. He was still stunned when the clown decapitated him with a wire. The laughter of Ebel the clown echoed all throughout the night. Jimmy was found the next morning, babbling incoherently and smelling of urine, by a deputy who was called out to answer calls from terrified neighborhood people who had found him wandering around. He babbled incoherently about the Midway, in bouts of wailing and insane laughter. As soon as they received the call on the radio, the deputies in the area drove out to the old abandoned Midway. There, they found the bodies of 6 local teenagers. They found the bodies of Carlos Ramirez, Heather Gray, Joe McIntyre, all killed by blunt force trauma to the head. Dana Wilson killed by asphyxiation due to a foreign object being introduced into her larynx. Harry Vincent, still wearing the clown suit, no visible scratches or bruises on him. He apparently died from a heart attack, by the look of sheer terror still frozen on his face. But the worst had been Tara Johnson and Tom Slanger. The killer had attached Tara's head to Tom's body, and Tom's body to Tara's head, with a huge rusty spring, essentially turning them into human bobbleheads. This gruesome detail was kept from the media. Jimmy lived on, but he was committed to a padded room in a sanitarium in Jacksonville. He hasn't stopped screaming since. Except to tell everyone that Ebel the Clown visits him every night to mock and torment him. Then he starts screaming again. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Content might not be as poignant as it has been. We're getting into the holidays and I have a pretty big family, so that's going to eat up a lot of time. I hope you all understand. But let's thank all the lovely patrons currently listed on screen right now. Dan R., Neophyte Games, Chaos X, Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, JY Pyromancer, Hayden MH, Ethan A, Daniel H, Maximilian Charles P, Deneen H, and welcome new patron, Go Cute Puppy LLC. I love cute puppies. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys like the story. I kind of like the campiness and campfire-ness of it. I don't really know how else to describe it, but thank you.